The Galactic Dilemma. High Counselor Drixus massaged his crystalline temples as the emergency session of the Galactic Council descended into chaos. The massive chamber, usually a model of order and sophistication, now echoed with the panicked voices of 100 different species. "The Void Weavers have evolved again," shouted Representative Lenara, her bioluminescent appendages flashing in distress. "They're not just consuming our power conduits anymore, they're developing resistance to our quantum barriers." The Void Weavers had started as nothing more than common space vermin, microscopic creatures that occasionally chewed through spacecraft wiring. But something about faster-than-light travel had triggered an unprecedented acceleration in their evolution. Now they were the size of small ships, with some colonies growing large enough to threaten entire space stations. Security Director Nix, her metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights, stepped forward. "The latest reports from the Centauri sector are troubling. The creatures have developed a form of collective intelligence. They're coordinating their attacks." A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing footage of the latest Void Weaver assault. The creature's iridescent, snake-like forms moved with terrifying precision, systematically dismantling a research station's defenses. "Our most advanced AI systems can't predict their behavior patterns anymore," continued Nix, her voice carrying the weight of countless failed operations. "Traditional deterrents are useless. They've even started using our own force fields as energy sources." Chancellor Orion of the Silicon Worlds raised all four of his energy appendages. "What about the quantum cascade protocol? Surely that..." "Failed," interrupted Science Minister Helrix, her gaseous form swirling with anxiety. "They adapted within hours. Some colonies actually grew stronger from the exposure." High Counselor Drixus watched the mounting hysteria with growing despair. The Galactic Council had faced many crises in its millennia of existence, wars, plagues, dimensional rifts, but this was different. This was an enemy that grew stronger with every attempt to destroy it. "Perhaps," came a quiet voice from the lower tier, "we're approaching this from the wrong angle." All eyes, sensors, and perception organs turned toward junior researcher Talia, a relatively new addition to the Council's scientific division. Her holographic form flickered slightly as she stood, betraying her nervousness. "Explain," commanded Drixus, trying not to sound too desperate. "We've been trying to outthink the Void Weavers with advanced technology," Talia continued, her confidence growing. "But maybe what we need isn't more sophisticated solutions. Maybe we need experts in dealing with persistent, adapting pests. Experts who have spent their entire history fighting creatures that constantly evolve to resist their methods." She waved her hand, and a new hologram appeared, a small blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "There's a pre-FTL civilization in the Sol system," she explained. "They call themselves humans. And they have turned pest control into an art form. They've spent millennia battling creatures that adapt and evolve, developing countless methods to outsmart rather than overpower their opponents." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices again, but this time with a different tenor. Security Director Nix stepped closer to examine the hologram, her sensors analyzing the data scrolling alongside it. "These humans," she said slowly, "they successfully manage thousands of different pest species? Without advanced technology? They've developed entire industries around it," Talia confirmed. "They have specialists for every environment and type of infestation. They're innovative, persistent, and most importantly, they never give up. When one method fails, they simply try another approach." High Counselor Drixus felt his crystalline structure vibrate with the first stirrings of hope. "And you believe they could adapt their methods to deal with the Void Weavers?" "They've already done something similar on their own world," Talia replied. "They regularly deal with pests that develop resistance to their countermeasures. They expect adaptation. They plan for it." Security Director Nix's exoskeleton clicked thoughtfully. "It's completely insane," she declared. Bringing a pre-FTL species into a galactic crisis? Asking them to deal with creatures that have defeated our most advanced technology? She paused, her sensory arrays pulsing. Which means it might be exactly what we need. High Counselor Drixus raised his arms for silence, his decision crystallizing. Prepare a first contact team, he commanded. If these humans are half as resourceful as you suggest, researcher Talia, they may be our last hope. He turned to address the full council. After all, who better to fight space vermin than a species that's been doing it since they lived in caves? The chamber hummed with nervous energy as preparations began. None of them could have known that this decision would not only solve their pest problem but fundamentally change the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. Earth's finest. Samira Hassan hadn't expected her Tuesday to include being recruited by aliens. She stood in her pest control company's warehouse, staring at the holographic projection of what appeared to be a space station being slowly devoured by iridescent, serpentine creatures. So let me get this straight, she said, adjusting her utility belt out of habit. You've got space bugs? Void weavers, corrected junior researcher Talia, her holographic form shimmering in the dim light. They're transdimensional energy-consuming entities that. Lady, a pest is a pest, Samira interrupted, already mentally cataloging approach strategies. Whether it's eating through your wiring or your reality, the principles stay the same. You need to understand their behavior, predict their patterns, and hit them where they live. Security Director Nix's metallic form shifted, reflecting fluorescent lights across the warehouse shelves. You seem, remarkably unfazed by this situation. Samira shrugged, moving to a shelf and beginning to pull equipment. Last month I dealt with a smart rat colony that learned to disable security systems and organize food raids. Month before that, it was super-resistant bedbugs that laughed at every chemical we threw at them. Adaptation is what pests do. The trick is staying one step ahead. That's exactly why we need you, Talia said eagerly. But we'll need more than one human expert. Do you have recommendations? Samira grinned. Oh, I know exactly who we need. 24 hours later, the warehouse hosted an unusual gathering. Marcus Wong, renowned for his innovative approaches to urban pest management, was examining the holographic displays with intense fascination. Deepa Patel, whose revolutionary biological control methods had transformed agricultural pest management, was already taking notes. And Jefferson Bear Williams, whose wilderness experience with invasive species control had earned him legendary status, was asking surprisingly technical questions about space station architecture. The conventional wisdom ain't working because you're fighting them like an army, Bear explained, his massive frame leaning over a holographic display. You gotta think like an exterminator, not a warrior. Exactly, Deepa chimed in, her eyes never leaving her tablet. Every pest has basic needs: food, shelter, reproduction. Disrupt those, you disrupt the whole system. Even space bugs need to eat and breed. Marcus nodded, pulling up his own research on his tablet. And they're energy eaters, right? That's not so different from dealing with termites that eat electrical insulation. We just need to scale up our methods. Speaking of scaling up, Samira interrupted, how exactly are we supposed to adapt our equipment for space use? The alien representatives exchanged glances before Talia spoke. We can provide you with access to our technology and manufacturing capabilities. Whatever you need, we can help modify it for cosmic scale. Bear let out a low whistle. Space-grade bug zappers? Now that's something I never thought I'd see. It's not just about the equipment, Deepa said, finally looking up from her notes. We need to understand their life cycle, their adaptation patterns. Show me everything you've got on their evolution rate. As Talia began sharing more detailed data, Security Director Nix observed the humans with growing amazement. Where the greatest minds of the galaxy had responded with fear and confusion, these humans were treating cosmic horror like a particularly interesting day at work. "You're actually enjoying this, aren't you?" she asked, her metallic voice carrying a hint of disbelief. "Are you kidding?" Marcus grinned, already sketching designs for what he called a quantum roach motel. "This is the ultimate challenge. Every pest control specialist dreams of finding a new problem to solve." "Besides," Samira added, reviewing the Void Weaver footage again, "somebody's got to do it. Might as well be the species that's been fighting this war since we figured out how to use sticks and rocks." The humans spent the next several hours planning, arguing, and occasionally high-fiving over particularly clever ideas. They compiled lists of equipment to be modified, designed new approaches based on tried-and-true Earth methods, and developed contingency plans A through Z. "One more thing," Bear said as they were wrapping up. "We're gonna need more people. Lots more. And training programs. Can't have humans being the galaxy's only exterminators forever." Security Director Nix's sensory arrays pulsed with interest. "You would be willing to teach other species your methods?" "Of course," Deepa replied, surprised. "That's how you stay ahead of the pests. Share knowledge, adapt together, keep innovating. Besides," she added with a smile, "somebody's got to carry on the family business." As the meeting concluded and preparations began for their first mission, Talia pulled Samira aside. "I must ask, aren't you worried about facing creatures that have defeated our most advanced technology?" Samira laughed, patting her trusty sprayer. "Honey, I once cleared out a cockroach infestation in a nuclear power plant. Trust me, technology isn't everything. Sometimes the old ways work best, especially when nobody expects them." Little did the galaxy know, humanity's old ways were about to revolutionize cosmic pest control forever. Operation Exterminator. The abandoned mining station Helios 7 hung in space like a massive silvery web, its once pristine surfaces now crawling with the iridescent forms of void weavers. From the observation deck of the Galactic Council's flagship, Security Director Nix watched with a mixture of concern and curiosity as the humans made their final preparations. "You want to use the station as bait?" she asked, her metallic voice betraying a hint of skepticism. "Classic pest control strategy," Samira replied, adjusting the controls on what looked like an oversized version of a standard pest control sprayer. "You don't just chase them out, you need to make sure they don't want to come back." Marcus was programming what he called his cosmic roach motels, now scaled up to the size of small shuttles. Every pest follows patterns. Even space-time eating cosmic horrors have predictable behaviors. They're drawn to energy sources, right? So we give them exactly what they want, with a twist. The twist being? Nix's sensory arrays pulsed with curiosity. Deepa looked up from her tablet where she was monitoring the Void Weaver's energy signatures. "Remember how I mentioned that even space bugs need to eat and breed? Well, we're about to give them the worst case of indigestion in galactic history." The human team had spent weeks modifying their equipment with the help of alien technology. Their usual tools had been transformed into cosmic-scale pest control devices, though they still insisted on keeping certain primitive elements that baffled their alien allies. Bear was supervising the placement of what he called quantum attractant nodes around the station's perimeter. You see, most advanced species try to push problems away with force. But sometimes, you gotta pull them in to push them out for good. The first phase of their plan began with a series of energy pulses designed to mimic the station's normal power signature, but amplified. Like moths to a flame, the Void Weavers began congregating around the seemingly vulnerable target. "They're taking the bait," Samira announced, watching the swarm's movement patterns. "Marcus, start up the motels." The modified traps began emitting their own unique energy signatures, creating what the humans called a pest highway, a path of least resistance that the Void Weavers would naturally follow. It was a scaled-up version of the same principles used to guide cockroaches into traps on Earth. "Now for the secret ingredient," Deepa said with a grin, activating her specially designed energy modulators. The food the Void Weavers were consuming began to change at the quantum level, making it increasingly unpalatable. The effect was almost immediate. The massive creatures began writhing uncomfortably, their iridescent forms twisting in ways that suggested severe discomfort. But instead of simply fleeing, they found themselves drawn deeper into the humans' trap network. "Watch this," Bear said proudly, triggering the next phase. The quantum attractant nodes activated in sequence, herding the Void Weavers through a series of increasingly uncomfortable environments. Each zone was designed to create negative associations with the entire sector of space. "It's like training a raccoon to stay out of your garbage," he explained to the bewildered alien observers. "Make the experience unpleasant enough, and they'll warn their friends to stay away too." The most fascinating part, from the aliens' perspective, was how the humans combined their advanced technology with surprisingly simple concepts. Marcus had insisted on including what he called cosmic bug zappers, modified versions of basic electrical pest control devices that now operated on a quantum level. "Sometimes the old ways work best," he said, watching with satisfaction as the Void Weavers recoiled from the barriers. "Especially when you dress them up with a little space magic." As the operation progressed, Security Director Nix's amazement grew. The humans weren't just removing the Void Weavers, they were fundamentally changing the creatures' behavior patterns. The pests were actually marking the area as dangerous, leaving behind chemical and quantum signatures that would warn others of their kind to stay away. "This is remarkable," Talia observed, her holographic form flickering with excitement as she recorded the data. "They're not just solving the immediate problem, they're creating a long-term deterrent." Samira nodded, making final adjustments to their containment field. "That's because we're not trying to win a war. We're establishing boundaries. These things are like any other pest, they'll go where survival is easiest. We're just teaching them that some places aren't worth the trouble." The operation concluded with a success that stunned the galactic community. Not only had the humans cleared the station, but they had also established what they called a pest-proof perimeter that would discourage future infestations. "But what if they adapt to these methods too?" Nix asked as the team packed up their equipment. "Oh, they probably will," Deepa replied cheerfully. "That's why we've already got plans B through Z ready to go. Pests adapt, so we adapt faster. It's a dance we've been doing since before we invented writing." As news of their success spread across the galaxy, the human team was already planning their next operation. They had proven their methods worked on a cosmic scale, now it was time to start training others. "You know what the best part is?" Bear mused as they watched the last Void Weaver signature disappear from their sensors. "We're probably the first pest control specialists in history who can honestly say our job is rocket science." The others groaned at the joke, but there was no denying the truth in his words. Humanity had just turned pest control into a galactic industry, and they were only getting started. The hive mind problem. "Well, that's new," Samira muttered, watching the holographic display with growing concern. The Void Weavers they were tracking through the Centauri sector weren't just moving in coordination anymore, they were problem-solving. The massive observation room aboard the Galactic flagship had become the humans' primary command center. Currently, it showed footage of a Void Weaver swarm systematically dismantling one of Marcus's quantum traps, carefully avoiding the trigger mechanisms they'd learned to recognize. "They're not just sharing information anymore," Deepa observed, her fingers flying across her tablet as she analyzed the data. "They're actively teaching each other. The swarm is becoming a collective intelligence." Security Director Nix's metallic form reflected the holographic light as she paced. "Our predictive models suggest they'll achieve true hive mind status within days. No pest control method has ever worked against a unified consciousness." "That's because you're thinking about this wrong," Bear said, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "A hive mind isn't some mystical superbeing. It's just a really big colony." The others turned to look at him. Marcus was the first to catch on, a slow grin spreading across his face. Like a super colony of ants? Exactly. Bear exclaimed. And what do we know about colony insects? They're complex but predictable, Samira finished, already reaching for her equipment. They follow rules, patterns. Even their problem-solving has limits. Deepa's eyes lit up. And they're vulnerable to disruption at multiple levels. We don't need to outthink the entire hive mind, we just need to break their communication patterns. The team quickly got to work, drawing on centuries of human experience dealing with collective insect behaviors. They modified their equipment yet again, this time incorporating principles used to manage everything from ant colonies to bee swarms. The key, Marcus explained to their alien observers, is understanding that even a hive mind has basic needs. Food, shelter, reproduction, these don't change just because they got smarter. Their new strategy took shape. Instead of trying to trap or repel the void weavers, they would disrupt the very processes that allowed the hive mind to function. Deepa developed what she called quantum pheromone scramblers, based on methods used to confuse ant trails. Marcus adapted his traps to emit signals that would create confusion in the collective consciousness, similar to how smoke confuses bees. Think of it like giving a supercomputer contradictory inputs, Samira explained to Nix. The individual units might be working fine, but if they can't coordinate properly, the whole system breaks down. The first test of their new approach came at the Proxima colony, where a massive void weaver swarm had begun constructing what appeared to be a collective neural network in space. The sight of the iridescent creatures weaving complex patterns of energy and matter was both beautiful and terrifying. Ready for Operation Anthill? Samira asked, checking her modified equipment one last time. The team deployed their devices in a carefully planned pattern around the swarm's perimeter. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually, the perfect synchronization of the void weavers began to falter. Look at that, Bear chuckled, pointing to where several groups of creatures had started moving in contradictory patterns. Just like when you mess up a termite's chemical trails. They don't know whether to turn left or right. The disruption spread through the swarm like ripples in a pond. The hive mind, instead of making the void weavers more dangerous, had actually made them more vulnerable. When one section became confused, that confusion propagated through the entire network. They're fragmenting, Deepa announced, monitoring the energy signatures. The hive mind is breaking down into smaller, manageable groups. Marcus activated his modified traps, now programmed to take advantage of the swarm's disorganization. Time for Phase 2, divide and conquer. The operation wasn't quick or spectacular like their previous missions. Instead, it was a methodical process of breaking down the hive mind into smaller and smaller units, then dealing with each group using their proven methods. You know what this reminds me of? Bear mused as they worked. That time I had to break up a super colony of fire ants that had taken over half a county. Sometimes the slow way is the smart way. After several days of careful work, the threat was neutralized. The void weavers hadn't just been driven away, they had been fundamentally changed. The survivors had lost their hive mind capabilities, reverting to a simpler form that could be managed with standard pest control methods. I don't understand, Nick said, reviewing the final reports. Our most advanced AI systems couldn't outthink their collective intelligence. How did such simple methods succeed? Because we weren't trying to outthink them, Samira explained, cleaning her equipment. We were working with their nature, not against it. Sometimes the best way to deal with a complex problem is to simplify it. As they packed up their gear, Deepa was already making notes for future improvements. We should start developing preventive measures against hive mind formation. Maybe something based on how we prevent ant colonies from reaching super colony status. One thing's for sure, Marcus added, the void weavers are going to adapt again. They always do. Let them, Bear said confidently. Humanity's been playing this game since before we built our first cities. We've got a few more tricks up our sleeves. The galactic community watched in amazement as the humans once again turned what seemed like an impossible challenge into just another day's work. But little did they know, the Void Weavers had one more evolution up their sleeve, one that would test humanity's pest control skills like never before. The final solution. The emergency alert came during what was supposed to be a routine training session. Samira had been teaching a group of alien students about basic pest behavior patterns when Security Director Nix burst into the classroom, her metallic form vibrating with urgency. "The Void Weavers," she announced, "they've evolved again. And this time, they're building something." The holographic display in the Galactic Council's emergency chamber showed what appeared to be a massive structure taking shape in the void between stars. Thousands of Void Weavers, their iridescent forms now larger than ever, were weaving together dark matter and energy into something unprecedented. "It's like they're making a nest," Bear observed, his experienced eyes noting the familiar patterns. "A really, really big nest." "Not just a nest," Deepa corrected, analyzing the energy readings. "They're creating a spawning ground. If this works, they could reproduce exponentially." Marcus whistled low. "So instead of dealing with thousands of Void Weavers, we'd be dealing with millions," Samira finished. "Maybe billions." The Galactic Council chamber erupted in panic, but the human team remained calm. They'd seen this before, just on a much smaller scale. "Remember that fire ant queen that tried to establish a new colony in that nuclear power plant?" Samira asked her team. "Same principle, different scale." "But these readings are off the charts," Talia protested, her holographic form flickering with anxiety. "They're manipulating dark matter itself." "Doesn't matter if they're using dark matter or dirt," Bear replied, already pulling up their equipment inventories. "A nest is a nest, and every nest has weak points." The team quickly formulated their plan, drawing on everything they'd learned from their previous encounters. They combined their knowledge of pest behavior with their understanding of the Void Weaver's evolution, creating what Marcus called the ultimate pest control solution. "The key," Samira explained to the council, "isn't to destroy the nest. That just scatters them to form new ones. We need to make this entire sector of space uninhabitable for them, permanently." Their plan was audacious. Using modified versions of every tool and technique they developed, they would transform the very fabric of spacetime in the region into something the Void Weavers couldn't tolerate. "Think of it like changing the pH balance of soil to discourage certain insects," Deepa explained. "Except we're doing it to space itself." The operation was the largest they'd ever attempted. Hundreds of ships, now equipped with human-designed pest control systems, moved into position around the massive nest. The team had trained crews from dozens of species, and now they would all work together. "Remember," Samira broadcast to all ships, "timing is everything. Just like any nest elimination, we need perfect coordination." The first phase began with Marcus's quantum deterrent fields, now scaled up to astronomical proportions. The Void Weavers reacted immediately, their synchronized movements becoming erratic as the familiar signals disrupted their coordination. Bear's modified attractant nodes created carefully calculated paths, herding the creatures away from their partially constructed nest. Deepa's energy modulators began altering the quantum structure of space itself, making it progressively more uncomfortable for the Void Weavers to remain in the area. "They're trying to adapt," Nix reported, watching the creatures attempt to modify their own structure to cope with the changes. "That's exactly what we want," Samira replied with a grim smile. "Keep pushing." As the Void Weavers struggled to adapt, the team implemented the final phase of their plan. Every ship activated their modified equipment simultaneously, creating a cascading wave of changes that transformed the sector into what Bear called the galaxy's biggest no-pest zone. The effect was spectacular. The Void Weavers, unable to adapt quickly enough to the fundamental changes in their environment, began to retreat en masse. The massive nest structure, deprived of the energy and coordination needed to maintain it, started to unravel. Don't let up, Samira commanded as some ships began to celebrate. Remember pest control rule number 1, always finish the job completely. Hours later, the sector was clear. The nest was gone, the Void Weavers had fled to distant parts of the galaxy, and most importantly, the space itself had been permanently altered to prevent their return. In the aftermath, as the Galactic Council celebrated their victory, the human team was already planning their next steps. We'll need to establish regular patrols, Samira said, making notes. Set up early warning systems, train more specialists. And research their next potential evolution, Deepa added. They'll adapt again eventually. Let them, Marcus replied confidently. That's the thing about pest control, it's never really over. It's about management, not elimination. The Council officially established the Galactic Pest Control Division, with humanity taking the lead role in training and operations. What had started as a desperate gamble had become a cornerstone of galactic civilization. You know what's funny? Bear mused as they watched their alien students practicing basic pest control techniques. The galaxy thought hiring humans was their biggest mistake. Turns out it was their best decision. Samira smiled, checking the latest reports from field teams across the galaxy. Just proves what every good pest control specialist knows. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. As humanity's reputation spread across the cosmos, other species began to understand a fundamental truth: in a universe full of advanced technology and incredible powers, sometimes you just need someone who knows how to think like a pest to solve your problems. And nobody did that better than the species that had spent its entire history dealing with the crawling, buzzing, persistent challenges of life. Humanity had found its niche in the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same.